Hi, I'm Dr. Lourdes DelRosso, and today I am going to be talking about regular sleep for a healthy future. This is the slogan for this year's World Sleep Day, which will be celebrated on March 19, 2021. I do not have any conflict of interest to report. World Sleep Day is an annual event that is intended to be a celebration of sleep and a call to action on important issues related to sleep, including medicine, education, social aspects, and driving. It is organized by the World Sleep Day Committee of the World Sleep Society and aims to lessen the burden of sleep problems on society through better prevention and management of sleep disorders. World Sleep Day is held the Friday before spring vernal equinox of each year. This year is going to be March 19, 2021. In this slide, we are seeing some of the prior slogans like last year, better sleep, better life, better planet. And you can read all the slogans back to 2008, sleep well, live fully awake. So this year, World Sleep Day slogan is regular sleep, healthy future. And for today's goals, we're going to present some evidence on the benefit of regular sleep. In particular, we're going to discuss the importance of sleep in health, and we're going to see how we can plan for a healthy future. So, some of the benefits of sleep that we're going to be talking about, and in particular, regular sleep, are going to be clearance of waste products from our brain, something extremely important and current. Current research, as we're going to be discussing, shows the importance of sleep in clearing waste products. Memory consolidation. We'll be talking about some executive function that sometimes we forget. Cardiovascular homeostasis, just very briefly, because it is something that we talk a lot during our sleep meetings, and some immune regulation. So, in this fascinating studies, the research found out that sleep is associated with oscillations in neuronal activity, blood oxygenation, and CSF flow, as we were able to see in the animation. The blue area is the CSF flow. During wakefulness, CSF exhibits a small amplitude rhythm synchronized to the respiratory signal, while during sleep, particularly within N3 stage, there's large oscillations that occur every 20 seconds and are driven by ventricular movement, resulting in significantly greater inflow of CSF. Although electrophysiological slow waves are known to play important roles in cognition, these results suggest that there may also be linked to physiologically restorative effects of sleep. And these macroscopic changes in CSF are expected to definitely alter waste clearance in the brain, as we're going to be seeing. As we remember, during sleep, GABA from the ventrolateral preoptic area inhibit neurotransmitters of wakefulness. Particularly the decline in norepinephrine leads to an expansion of the brain's extracellular space, leading to decreased resistance to the flow of fluid, increasing the clearance of interstitial solutes. This happens specifically during N3. The role of sleep in lymphatic clearance has been then truly demonstrated. Photoimaging of in vivo mice demonstrated a 90% reduction in lymphatic clearance during wakefulness and twice the amount of protein clearance from the brain intima during sleep. In these figures, the authors illustrate the model of lymphatic function if young patients on the top, older patients without Alzheimer's in the middle diagram, and patients with Alzheimer's disease in the bottom. In young people, CSF travels along periarterial routes, entering the brain parenchyma and washes solutes and waste products into the veins. In older people, we can see that there is reduced lymphatic clearance. But in those with Alzheimer's, the accumulation of amyloid beta impairs fluid movement within the interstitial space, decreasing further the lymphatic clearance. Remember from sleep physiology that N3 decreases with age, and parallel to this decrease, we see a decrease in waste clearance in the brain as well. In this diagram, we're seeing the efflux of CSF containing substances in various conditions that are pathways to dementia. On the top, we see the clearance of amyloid beta in patients with Alzheimer's and the efflux clearance of tau protein and in next to the bottom, Parkinson's disease alpha synuclein, and comparing with the flow of lymphatic CSF influx. We can see in the top that amyloid beta deposition typically first occurs in the basal portions of the frontal, temporal, and occipital lobes, and later the plaques spread to include the hippocampus, the posterior parietal cortex, initially sparing both the motor and sensory cortices. In the initial stages of Alzheimer's disease, um, phosphorylate tau deposits in the entorhinal cortex, followed by the hippocampus and dorsal thalamus, while the neocortex becomes involved later. So this image is actually showing us how this prion-like spread of protein aggregates follow the distribution of the lymphatic inflows of CSF tracer. This can be in the future probably be made even a marker of Alzheimer's and of all of these conditions, the movement of these proteins. In this model, which is fascinating, we can see the lymphatic system can be in the middle, in the intersection of various disorders. Um, we start with aging, decreasing sleep quality, decreasing clearance of substances, but compounded with sedentary lifestyle, cardiovascular disorders, other conditions that could affect further, like circadian misalignment, sleep disorders such as sleep apnea, depression, substance abuse, obesity. All of these conditions can impair further the lymphatic clearance of the lymphatic flow. This stagnation of lymphatic flow and therefore the extracellular proteins contributes to protein aggregation, um, and leading to local inflammation, neuronal loss, and ultimately dementia. In this diagram, it illustrates the sleep architecture of young and old individuals. On the top, we can see that for young people, we have N3 sleep dominating the early phases of sleep, the early phases at night, while REM sleep is more frequent in later phases. We are very used to seeing this distribution of sleep stages when we read our sleep studies. While in contrast, in people older than 60 years of age, sleep is often interrupted by short periods of wakefulness. N3 is significantly reduced. And in this diagram, we are comparing the sleep stages with lymphatic flow in green in the scale in the middle, with the darker green being higher degree of lymphatic flow and therefore clearance of these waste products and these proteins. Um, so this is the proposed efficacy of lymphatic clearance on the basis of previous data collected. The lack of stage 3, the frequent interruptions on stage non-REM sleep, N1, and the shorter total sleep time all contribute to decreased lymphatic activity in aging. So up to here, we have seen the importance of sleep in clearance of products, proteins, waste products in the brain. And I hope that this evidence and this few slides have been compelling to you as they have been compelling to me on the importance of sleep, slow wave sleep in the clearance of these waste products in the brain. But how about sleep regularity and sleep deprivation, sleep disruption in other aspects of brain and brain development? So In this longitudinal study, the authors examined how sleep during adolescent years is associated with white matter integrity. The researchers found that greater variability in sleep duration, meaning sleeping 4 hours some days and 10 hours another days and 7 hours one day and then 12 hours another day, um, was associated um, with they actually did this, the greater variability in sleep duration on the year prior to doing the study with diffusion tensor imaging was associated with lower white matter integrity above and beyond the effect of sleep duration alone. In this research, the investigators concluded that variability in sleep duration during adolescence may have long-term implications on the connectivity in the developing brain. Um, while actually in healthy adolescent development, white matter connectivity should be increasing during adolescence. So in this in box A, we see the splenium of the corpus callosum. In a figure B, the posterior limb of the internal capsule. C, superior longitudinal fasciculus, and D, the corticospinal tract. Um, so another important point about this study is that it wasn't really correlated with just weekend. It was the overall. So it was the sleep variability. It was not due just to the variability from weekdays and weekends. But it was that the variability in duration of sleep was more detrimental when it was overall and not just between weekdays and weekends. How about gray matter? In this study, gray matter volume was calculated in 43 young adults and 37 old adults. And we're going to see with the colors in young adults and older adults. And they did analysis in areas of gray matter volumes and changes in uh, before and after sleep deprivation. And they found that there were a decrease in gray matter volume in the right thalamus, the left precuneus, and the postcentral gyrus. So you can start seeing how this sleep irregularity, sleep deprivation, both insufficient sleep and irregular sleep can affect development of these areas at important times in our life. I was fascinated by this study because it shows how restless sleep during REM period can affect the adaptation of the amygdala to some events. So they show that restless sleep per se, as it is evident in the bottom diagram. So we have more consolidated sleep in the top diagram and restless sleep, divided REM sleep in the bottom diagram, show how restless REM sleep impedes emotion processing in terms of amygdala reactivity. This finding can provide some potential target for treatment of mental disorders that can be characterized by restless sleep, such as insomnia, depression, or anxiety. What is really interesting is that the solid REM sleep can facilitate the adaptation of the amygdala if as mentioned, REM was consolidated. Um, so what this means in reality is in this study, what they did was they exposed the 29 participants to strong odors and songs out of tune. And after sleep, they saw with imaging the reactivity of the amygdala. And after sleep, they exposed them again to this stimuli. And in patients with consolidated REM, there was there was improvement in the reaction. But in patients with restless REM, there was almost the same reaction as if they hadn't had that exposure before. So this shows us how this adaptation of the amygdala to unpleasant stimuli improves after solid REM, and it doesn't occur with fragmented REM sleep. This was fascinating. So, how about executive function? This is an area that is fascinating because we, as physicians, as parents, as family members, We want to have a healthy life, and we want our children to grow into a healthy future. We want adults to make the right decisions, to have inhibitory control, which means I am able to focus on this particular area that needs my attention at this time and ignore the rest of the stimuli, to have a working memory, that memory that just comes second nature to help me solve problems on site, to have cognitive flexibility to adapt to stressors, to adapt to certain situations. So there are a lot of studies, and in this talk, it's impossible to cover them all, but of effect of sleep disorders on executive function. But also, I found a couple of studies. In this particular image, we are summarizing the areas that are important for executive function. And you're going to see already that some of these areas we're seeing are affected. Like we see the amygdala, we see thalamus, hypothalamus, the prefrontal cortex, all of these areas that we have been seeing that are affected by irregular sleep or sleep deprivation are also important areas in executive function. In this particular study, the black boxes are adults and young adults, and the gray boxes are older adult participants. And we can see that standardized tests for executive functions were used, including Sternberg for working memory, Stroop for inhibition, and analysis show a significant main effect. In this particular slide, we're seeing wake after sleep onset, a particular correlation between wake and sleep onset of inhibition, verbal fluency, and delayed recall. And lower wake after sleep onset was associated with better performance. So the more consolidated sleep, the better in these executive function areas. Wake after sleep onset was also significantly related to working memory in the younger group, but not in the older group. Um, in this other part, we look at the function of total sleep time, and longer total sleep time was associated with better working memory. And this main effect was moderated by age group. So the relationship was significant in the young, excuse me, in the younger group, but not in the older group. The moderating effect of the age group and relationship between total sleep time was significant for both working memory and verbal fluency. What it's really interesting in this study is that we can see that while total sleep time specific differences in sleep continuity play a greater role in older adults, both total sleep time and sleep continuity are important in performance for young adults. Potentially, one difference could be age difference in sleep needs, or one difference could be that we develop some of the executive functions up to age of 25, and then some remain. So I think, in my opinion, the studies show that to have this development of executive functions in terms of cognition, the working memory, decisions, inhibition, we need to have good consolidated sleep and total sleep early as a youth, and it'll be a good practice to have good consolidated sleep into our adult years. Memory. Very briefly again, memory, the fate of our memory in our cortical networks is dependent and determined on slow wave sleep and spindles. There's a fine balance between slow waves and spindles. And usually what happens is when during non-REM sleep, cortisol and acetylcholine decrease, this is essential to promote transfers from those initially encoded memories that if you remember, we have encoding and consolidation and retrieval. Those are the three stages of memory. And we have the encoding of our memory, but then those memories stay in the hippocampus unless they get consolidated. And that consolidation is facilitated with stage N3 and with the spindles. And what happens is these memories are transferred from the hippocampus to the neocortex. This is a complicated diagram, but in pretty much it summarizes the oscillatory mechanisms that are underneath the encoding, the consolidation, and the retrieval of information during learning and comprehension. Specifically, the diagram illustrates the interplay between the neuronal oscillations during comprehension and also in relation to sleep dependent consolidation. So this is a little bit of a complicated diagram, but it illustrates how all of these functions are dependent, both memory and consolidation are dependent on sleep processes. We're a little bit more familiarized with the effects on cardiovascular. We talk a lot about it in the terms of obstructive sleep apnea and sleep deprivation, but this is just one slide to summarize how sleep deprivation can act by all of these various pathways of glucose tolerance, sympathetic activation, activity, and immunity, and further lead to endothelial dysfunction, metabolic disorders, automatic nervous system activation, and uh, and all of these conditions will lead to vascular calcification, atherosclerosis, hypertension, and heart disease. So this is just in one summary, the effects of sleep deprivation. Also, um, the sleep deprivation, not enough sleep on immunity is very clear and have been demonstrated either by maladaptation of circadian associated proteins, by also endoplasmic reticulus, which is the ER, stress unfolding protein responses, which is the UPR, autophagy and apoptosis, inflammation-related molecules as cytokines, heat shock proteins, inflammatory factors, adhesion molecules. Um, the contents in the dotted type suggest potential novel directions for sleep deprivation investigations, such as alterations of DNA and RNA levels, and post-translational levels like acetylation and methylation. So these are some of the conclusions and future research on immunity. So I could say, why do we need to have healthy sleep in the future? Well, we talk a little bit about the heart, we talk a lot about the brain, we talk about emotion, about regulation, um, about all these areas of cognition that sometimes we forget. As I mentioned, we want to alert people all over the world, in everywhere, of the effects of sleep. We want children to grow with good executive function, with good learning capacities, with good memory, excelling in school, being the adults that reaching their most potential for their future and their life. We want our adults to perform well at work, to have successful, satisfying jobs and careers. We want our elderly to age healthy, to have a successful aging, and to have a happy aging. So we want, for the future, we want both youth, our adults, and elders to have a good, healthy life. And I strongly believe that sleep is a key component of achieving that healthy life in the future. And why not now? So, in this scenario, the World Sleep Day is an ambassador all over the world. We have these programs and encourage people all over the world to submit activities, to reach, to educate the world on the importance of sleep to achieve this healthy future. Thank you so much for your attention, and I will be available for some questions.